Good morning, it's Thursday, 8. You all right? We had a car accident over here in the corner.
Okay. 5 minutes major.
That may be misconduct.
Oh, we're having a little fun here this morning. We are gonna spend some time, talking about 484 and, a couple attachments that we're gonna do on that. The 484 is a miscellaneous agriculture bill that came over from House Agriculture. It started out with the substantial benefits, or whatever they call them,
Beneficial substance.
beneficial substances bill. We've probably got a pesticide bill that's being pushed by all sides. I think that would be fairly easy to attach to that and have no problems with. And we have another amendment that we're doing. So we have our chief counsel in here, Michael O'Grady, who's going to walk us through what he has, and we'll talk about the amendment that's going that Senator Caldmore has. And we'll see if there's a possible vote that could be had. We also talked just briefly offline about the whether this bill is something that we should get out this week or hold on to it next week in case something else comes along and use it as a vehicle. And I think we're undecided as far as where we are with that. So that is the update of where we are. And with that, we're gonna have our chief counsel, Michael O'Grady, lead the way for us. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. So Chair, you referenced the potential amendment to be offered by Senator Caldmore. Do you want me to work off of that document? Or do you want me to work off of the?
What is going to, I want you to do with whatever you want to do.
Okay.
So I will, I don't have unless the committee has a preference about how we go.
I know.
Whatever then,
All right.
Michael, whatever you want, whatever you'd like to do.
So it looks like the amendment from Senator Caldmore is on your webpage. It's why don't we work it from that?
Okay.
And I'll just generally walk through the subject areas of the bill, and note where there have been previous changes and note where there is either the proposed change from Senator Caldmore or where I'm not really sure where you are on the subject. So the first 23 pages are the beneficial substances provisions, and they have not changed since the bill has been in here. And I assume you don't want further changes.
I think we're good. Everybody comfortable enough to where we can move on from that?
Yes.
Okay, then we won't have you, yep.
And then you come to the pesticide language, which is on page 23. And as you noted, and this was not my understanding the last time I was here, that it was all parties, including industry, that have agreed to this. And John let me know that the last time I was in. And so, as you stated, Chair, that is what would be proposed from those parties remains proposed on page 24, actually. That there would be that extra registration fee, the $50 per product deposited into the pesticides fund to be used for the collection of those waste or end of life pesticides, and that would be in place until such time as an EPR program was implemented. And section 3 would be that study to look at options for sustainable funding sources to reimburse solid waste management entities for all costs associated with collection, and including a look at creating an extended producer responsibility program for pesticides. So that remains unchanged from what all of the advocates have brought forward. And then on page 27 is the accessory on-farm business language. This is where I have a question for you. I don't know where you are with this language. I know you've been talking to Ellen, but I don't know where you are.
Well, I'm going to defer to Senator Major. And I'm gonna give him just a moment, kind of what we talked about. Actually, I'm not. Go ahead.
So, I think we're gonna go on hold with this.
Okay.
And then crack the bill for next year.
Okay, so I should remove section 4, section 5, section 4 and section 5 from the bill.
I mean, are we agreement on that? Is that our?
I think that I am, as long as you are.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's.
I don't want to hold this bill up. I think that this would do that. And I want to, this is my opinion, I would like the others to weigh in. I just believe that if we put this in any way, that it's going to come back to us. And any part of this is going to come back to us. I think that ANR will get a hold of it, and I don't want to hold up this bill for that.
So I've committed to the Senator Major and to the rest of the committee that, Chief Counsel, that we would probably, we would take this subject and make it as pointed, laser focused on what we're trying to accomplish, much like we did with S-124, and try to pass that out with a laser focus on that and let things land where they land like they have on that. And so that nobody feels the threat of us trying to get into their backyard. We're just trying to take care of what's very important to agriculture. And so that will be our focus coming back next year. And so we talked about it as a committee. I just, again, in fairness to Senator Major, who's been driving this, I wanted to hear his words, but I think that we talked about a committee. That's where we would land on that.
Okay, so I will take those 2 sections out.
Everybody else good?
Yeah. That brings you to page 29 of 3.1 and section 6. And this is, Clerk Collmore, do you want me to summarize what this is?
Sure.
So in your previous draft, you had an exemption from the 3-acre stormwater permit for all agricultural affairs. This is not an exemption. This is just a provision that says that no stormwater impact fee or completion of an offset shall be required for the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which is the official name of the state fair, under the 3-acre stormwater permit required under 10 VSA 1264, provided that the society is registered with the Agency of Agriculture. So what does that mean? So when you get a 3-acre permit, you have to comply with the Stormwater Management Manual, the operating requirements for stormwater in the state. And first, what you have to do is do an engineering feasibility analysis of what you can practically do on site. And if you cannot meet your performance measures with the practical implementation, then you have 2 options. You can do an off-site offset, which is another project off-site to control that amount of sediment or stormwater flow that you couldn't control on your original site. Or if you can't find an offset, you can pay an impact fee that goes into a fund that's then used by the agency to perform other measures, sometimes offsets, sometimes just projects in that same watershed to meet the same type of performance measure that you could not meet on your site. This is saying that the Rutland County Fair will not have to do that off-site offset or pay that impact fee. They will just need to do what's practically possible on site under the stormwater management.
There's a question, I guess, for you. What does that mean? I mean, practical. What was the last phrase? Phraseology?
Practically possible.
Practically possible.
It's So it will be about what the engineers go on site. They do this engineering feasibility analysis of what they can do on site. And it varies. It varies due to site constraints. And from what you have all heard, there are significant site constraints at the Rutland County Fair, including the railroad, which I think is just that's a significant site constraint because you can't go into their easement for anything that they won't allow, and unless it qualifies for one of the exemptions, but very few things do. And so that's going to be tough. So now you're, instead of 4 boundaries, you have 3 boundaries, and one of those boundaries is also state highway. So now you have a railroad on one boundary, a state highway on another, and like, where are you going to find any flexibility? So I think an engineering feasibility analysis is they will find things to do on site, but they will not be able to do nearly a complete performance measure, and therefore they'll be relieved of that extra requirement to do an offset or impact.
It's reasonable, but sometimes we deal with unreasonable people, and that's the the rub.
Yeah, so I liken it, maybe it's not a great analogy, to a partial shield for the Rutland County Agricultural Society. Much like if you play football, you might have to wear shoulder pads and a helmet, and maybe that's all. This doesn't provide you with that total exemption, which is what I think a lot of us were after, to just say, hey, Rutland Fair, you don't have to worry about anything. The likelihood of that not creating waves later was enough for me, and this language, it basically came from Secretary Moore. So she's supportive of it, or at least gave me an indication that it would be something that they wouldn't try to stop. So it's crafted carefully so that there's some protection for the fair, but not a total exemption. And I understand the difference. And at one point, I was not going to even offer it, but I did speak with a lobbyist yesterday, and it seemed like since we took all the other fairs out and made this somewhat shielding, it's something that I think might be okay.
The practical part worries me
Yeah, well, that's open to interpretation with the engineers. I get that.
because they can do under earth storage.
As Michael mentioned, they could decide that the 2 acres where you used to have the Ferris wheel has to become a pond, I guess. I mean, I don't know how else to phrase it. There could be some limitations as to what they can do, but they're not off of it totally.
But that's in a negotiation, so it can't be.
Hopefully.
Right.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
we have it fair. I mean,
yeah, no, I think it at least for the foreseeable future.
Cow in a car, and I'm okay.
There were some years, by the way, during the war, back when, where they did it, literally have 2 or 3 cows and a guy, and that was the fair, from what I'm led to believe. So it's not perfect, but it's probably as good as we can get this year. So I'm gonna offer it if everybody agrees and see where it goes. I don't think Secretary Moore will object. So I'm hoping that means that there's a little bit more of a clear sailing through the next committee that will probably want to take a look at it. And since there are fees here, I assume there'll have to be a stop down the hall at finance too. So this isn't something that we're going to, get to the floor probably next week even.
Well, if you keep the next 4 pages in, which is related to taxes, it's definitely going to finance.
But that $50.
And there's their fee and the beneficial substances as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So regardless, it's going to finance.
That's going to finance.
Okay.
I don't
What do
know
you-
if I aptly kind of described the situation they're in, but
What's not knowing with what somebody says or whatever, but you alluded that Secretary Moore was happy with the language. Is it will she go in and defend this bill on the next committee, do you think?
It was drafted by the agency, so
Okay.
I have to think, when you say happy, I don't
No,
mean
hard
to
words, I
imply
get
that
it.
she's hoping pretty.
Over on the major side.
But I think there's at least a measure of
Some
support.
sport.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that goes a long way. She's on board with that.
Fair bucket?
I'm good.
So you're looking at the language. So-
I moved on to that. I'm now done with that one.
Okay.
Okay, so the next section relates to use value. And I'm not sure if you heard testimony, but the concept is one of the ways that you qualify for use value is that you show that you have produced an annual gross income from the sale of farm crops on parcels that are less than 25 acre. And this is allowing not just from income or the equivalent value of donated farm crops. So $2,000 for a parcel up to 25 acres of donated farm crops, $75 per acre for each acre from 25. So that would put some of the charitable farms eligible for enrollment in this side.
And we did have testimony from, I can't remember the farmer's name.
Paul Ralston.
Yes. Madison.
Yes.
Should I move on?
Can you just go down through maybe on page 30 and just go down through those numbers?
Sure. So it really starts on page 29 when you see what agricultural land is. It's land that is in active use to grow hay or cultivated crops, pasture livestock, etc. That is 24 acres or more in size. Right. So that's the first way you qualify for use value. A farmer owns agricultural land 25 acres or more in size. And there's a presumption that land is used for agricultural purposes. That's owned by a farmer and is part of the overall farm unit. It's used by the farmer as part of the farmer's operation for at least 3 years. Or, and this is where you get into less than 25 acres, that has produced an annual gross income from the sale of farm crops or now the equivalent value of donated farm crops in 1 of 2 or 3 of the 5 calendar years preceding. $2,000 for parcels up to 25 acres. So that's all you need for the sale of farm crops or now the donation of farm crops. If you do 2,000 or more, up to 25 acres will be eligible for enrollment in use value. And for everything that's over 25 acres, it's an additional $75 per acre, with the total income required not to exceed 5,000. So that's how you still generally have to be a farmer, but subdivision C will allow some land that's not necessarily owned by a farmer to qualify for use value and appraisals. Actually, that's the quick, you generally have to be a farmer. And farmer means that you earn half or more of your income from the business of farming is defined by the internal service.
Okay. But isn't changing any of that. All we're doing is changing the part of donating food to count towards actual money so that you can qualify for the program.
Right, so that it's not about income, just income, it could be about income or donated value.
Everybody clear on that?
Yep.
And then you move on to the income tax provisions, taxable income, obviously everyone knows what that is. You'll see that there are exceptions from what is taxable income on page 30. It's your individual federal adjusted gross income decreased by the following items of income. So you will see on page 32 that the following would be decreased from your taxable income: the amount of any net farm profit provided the taxpayer's net farm profit during the taxable year did not exceed $10,000. So it's basically up to $10,000 reduction. Notwithstanding subdivision 2, which is the provision with respect to adjusted net capital gain. So it's your capital gain provision. So notwithstanding that, adjusted net capital gain income from the sale of real estate that is part of a farming operation, provided the buyer continued using the real estate as part of farming and is related to the seller by blood, marriage, civil union, or adoption, or the buyer was an employee of the farming operation for a minimum of 10 years prior to the sale. I do think this needs a little bit of restructure, because the condition that the buyer continue to use the real estate as part of farming only applies to the blood, marriage, civil union, or adoption. It doesn't apply to the farming operation employee. So I would move, provided the buyer continue using the real estate as farming operation as up to the previous sentence, and then sub 1 would be the buyer is related to the seller by blood, marriage, civil union, or adoption, or the buyer was an employee of the farming operation. So the land needs to remain in farming.
So take section 1, put it behind provided, and then section 2 becomes section 1.
So it would be more along the lines of here. I'll read it to you though. Notwithstanding subdivision 2 of the subdivision 20 would be adjusted net capital income from the sale of real estate that's part of a farming operation, and that is continued use, and the real estate continues its use as part of farming operation. And colon, the buyer is related to the seller by blood, marriage, civil union, or adoption, or the buyer was an employee of the farming operation. But we're going to move the condition that it continue to be used as part of the farming operation up to the lead in to the subdivision 1 and 2.
Right.
And it'll need some.
And that's just so that it doesn't leave out the 10-year prior the employee.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that, well, it really is to ensure that the land continues to be used as farming once it's sold. And then there's the effective date, it's July 1, 2025. So you do have some markup, you have the removal of the accessory on farm business, and you have that change to language that we just discussed.
Should we go with that? Everything they've heard? Have council change that stuff for us and vote it up tomorrow? And you need to vote it up today?
Where did section 8 come from?
Paul Ross,
Yeah.
Paul Ross didn't from that.
Because he donates all his.
No, yeah, I remember that part of his testimony. I didn't recall the rest of it. But
Council,
I'm good with it.
how? So I always want to be careful about, are we just doing real estate because one person said it? Is this helpful? Is this last section of it, is it helpful? I mean, do you see this solving a problem for many people?
Well, I definitely see the $10,000 in net profit being something that farmers are going to embrace. It reduces their taxable income. And then
That Fred person.
What's that?
Remember we had that lady
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that made bread and was hoping that you could change that ceiling for her as well.
Right, so it's at 6,000 now or whatever it was.
and the transfer of property of a farming unit to your family is already exempt from like the land use change tax and their use value. You're not penalized for that. And so it's extending that concept of encouraging the transfer of land and making that transfer of land for farming easier. That's going to be enjoyed by more than one person. It's gonna be something that farming families will support.
Any questions? Any more wanted changes to any of the language? Everybody understand where we're at with it? Okay. So what we would do, sir, is if you would revise it.
Yep.
And we'll take a quick look at it tomorrow. I don't know where you're at. I don't know if we need to have you back, to vote this out. If you were available for 10 minutes, that would be great. And if not, we could probably forge ahead, depending on what your schedule is.
Well, I'm just getting shoehorned in here and there,
Mhm.
so I have time around 11.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that we have 11:30
Around
and
north 11.
we could do 11 and we
Yeah.
meet at 11 and just vote this out. Everybody good?
Yep. Floor's 11 or 11:30?
11:30.
Okay.
Yeah, so that gives us time to
How
do
many months
that.
have been here?
You're new. It's
So
like,
you just stick next to Major, you'll be okay.
No, here it's the other way around, for sure.
Anything from anybody in the room? Everybody good?
Thank you.
Yep. Nobody's on the screen?
Nobody.
Okay. Everybody good here?
we're good.